Hi, it's Cami! 英語の独学は難しいですよね。本当に正しい方法で勉強できているのか、時間を無駄にしていないかと悩むこともあると思います。また、モチベーションを保つのも簡単ではありません。今回はベルリッツの教師マネージャーを務めるジェレミーさんに、独学に関する話を聞いてきました。独学での英語学習をより簡単で効果的にするためのアドバイスをたっぷり共有してくれました。モチベーションを保ちながら学習の効果を最大限に引き出したい方はぜひご覧ください。Hi Jeremy, thanks again for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Today we're going to be talking about self-study advice. First, before we get started, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Jeremy. I was born in England in the UK, but grew up in Austria. I'm bilingual, German and English, and I have been teaching English and German at Berlitz for about 14 years now.
I know that you are very interested in helping students become better speakers in the easiest way possible. So can you tell us again how you became interested in that?
Like many other people, I struggled at school and I found learning difficult and challenging. And when I decided to go into teaching, I decided that I really wanted to focus on making learning fun and enjoyable, specifically for those that do struggle in school or in any other form of learning.
You were a music teacher as well, right?
Yes, I was, yes.
Okay. Did you pick up any good skills for helping people learn things easily with music? I imagine that must be really frustrating as well.
Well, actually, since you mentioned that, yes. One of them, I had to study piano as a music teacher, and my main instrument was actually the cello, which you kind of wrap around you, so it feels like part of the body, whereas the piano always felt too far away from me, and I didn't really enjoy it very much. But I noticed that if there was one piece that I particularly liked, I was perfectly happy to practice that for hours on end until I could do it. And I realized that that also in language teaching is one way of motivating yourself to choose something that you really want to learn, something that interests you. And you will find it much easier to stay focused, stay motivated, and actually achieve that.
In regards to self-study, my first question for you is actually that I know that people can find self-study very frustrating. It's very difficult to feel any sense of self-improvement. It's very hard to see your progress when you're studying by yourself. So are there any common mistakes that people tend to make when they're doing self-study?
I think the most common one is trying to learn vocabulary out of context. So just getting yourself a dictionary or a list of vocabulary and just trying to learn those by heart and measuring your progress by how many words you can remember by the end of the day, right? Also studying for exams, feeling that if I pass this exam, that proves that I have actually improved my language skills. And I guess the unrealistic far off goals. So trying to achieve too much too quickly.
I know that in terms of studying for exams, this is sometimes an issue we have at Berlitz where students want us to help them prepare for their exams. And we have plenty of materials that can help people do the best that they possibly can in English exams. However, we always say that it's a good idea to improve your overall English speaking skills because you can learn the techniques for taking a test, but you also need to have the foundational knowledge of English.
Absolutely, yes.
So what advice would you give to somebody that wants to study by themselves then?
Well, first of all, don't study vocabulary lists. Just because you know a word doesn't mean you know how to use it properly. Same goes for grammar. Don't just buy a grammar book and work your way through different grammar structures, because you wouldn't know when to use the grammar correctly. Yeah. My advice is to focus on words and grammar as a means of communication within context. It's both much easier and faster to learn how to handle a specific situation than it is just to learn dry grammar and vocabulary.
What do you mean by learning in context?
We use language to communicate with other people at work, at home, or while traveling. If we imagine we are at a train station, for example, trying to buy a ticket, we have a clear goal. I am going to go up to the ticket office, I'm going to ask for a ticket and give them the destination, and I'm going to try and purchase this ticket. We can now choose vocabulary and grammar needed to achieve this one specific goal. And that gives you an achievable goal, and you have the satisfaction at the end of it, knowing, now I can go to the next train station and buy a ticket in English.
A little bit earlier, you said study grammar and vocabulary as a means of communication within a context. So basically, you should still study grammar and vocabulary, but maybe choose the specific grammar and vocabulary that you would need for one task.
Well, I'm thinking more like learning phrases. So for example, if I want to say, I want to buy a ticket from this place to this place, then I will learn that as a phrase, and I'll then maybe look at options. Do I want a single or a return ticket? So I can see what words I can exchange. But if I learn that as a phrase rather as a list of 5 words and then the grammar to go with it, then it makes much more sense and it feels much less like studying.
Because you're immediately using it in that situation, it's probably a lot easier to remember as well.
Absolutely, yes.
We still want to always increase our vocabulary as much as possible. So is there anything else that students can do to improve their vocabulary?
Absolutely. I recommend reading stories, especially novels, or listening to audiobooks, because you will learn or pick up new language within context, and it keeps repeating itself, so you get a good idea without having to translate. I think it's very important, though, that you choose something at your level or below your level, because if it's too difficult, you're just going to lose interest. Also, I recommend choosing something that you are interested in. Like I mentioned earlier with the piano, finding something that you really, really want to achieve or really want to be able to do can be a great motivator to keep going.
I think that's really important. When something is interesting and it's relevant to your life, that's the best chance that you've got of remembering new vocabulary. You also mentioned that you recommend reading stories and listening to audiobooks, and I assume that's because when you're reading a book or something quite long like that, you can often hear the same vocabulary introduced to you multiple times, so it's a good way to naturally learn new vocabulary.
Absolutely, yes. So maybe the first time you hear a new word, don't immediately go to the dictionary, just keep reading. If you want to find out what happens next, right? That word inevitably will come back again and again in slightly different situations. So the second time you might think, oh, maybe it means this. The third time you might recorrect and think, actually, I think it's more likely to mean this. Fourth or fifth time, you're going to be pretty sure. Yes, I'm pretty sure it means that.
Does that mean that you should never translate when you're learning new words?
I think using dictionaries or internet searches are a great way of confirming things, but I do recommend using English rather than English-Japanese translation, because you're going to see the word in context and you're going to have a much better understanding of its use and meaning. Our goal in learning a language is to be able to use the language and think in that language without having to translate. So every time we do translate, we are creating a connection that we'd rather not have, actually.
Yeah, it kind of pulls us out of the zone as well, right? That is really fantastic advice, but I know that sometimes it can be quite frustrating to learn a language, even if you're trying to use fun things and books that you enjoy. How can students stay motivated when they're on their self-study journey?
I think it's very important to set realistic and achievable short-term goals. And like we talked about in previous interviews, also Ellie mentioned this, celebrate small victories and remind yourself of the reason why you wanted to learn English in the first place.
Do you have any example of how someone can be studying by themselves and set a realistic, achievable short-term goal?
Sure. Imagine you're going on a trip and you want to prepare to be able to handle all aspects of it. Don't think of the travel as the goal, break it down. So for example, the first step will be to get a taxi to the airport. So I'm just going to look at the language necessary to tell the taxi driver where I want to go and maybe pay for the taxi ride. The next step would be to go to the check-in counter and check in for my flight. So that language needed for that would be your second goal. The third goal could be then to go through security. The fourth goal could be to buy your favorite coffee or some souvenirs and so on. So break it down into small goals where each time you can say, I've just achieved that. And the goals build up then eventually to reach your overall goal of being able to handle the trip.
Okay, so basically something very achievable that you can do, and then just learning the vocabulary and phrases around that specific situation, and something that you can really imagine yourself doing and put yourself in that kind of situation.
It also helps with the memory because the more you're focused on that one task, the more it makes sense in itself.
Yes, exactly. That's why we always say learn language as a means of communication.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. There's one last kind of topic that I wanted to quickly touch on, which is language study apps. Do you have any thoughts on them? Are they useful for people learning a new language?
Absolutely. I think language learning apps can be very useful as an addition to what you're doing to learn the language. They offer flexibility and allow you to study anytime and anywhere you are. Many apps use gamification to make it more fun to learn a language, and again, it breaks it down into small achievable goals, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think definitely the gamification is really good to like build your foundational knowledge of a language as well.
It's also a great way to review things that you have already learned.
Okay, so those were all of my questions for you, Jeremy. Thanks so much again.
Thank you for having me.
And before we say goodbye, do you have any final advice for people that are studying English by themselves?
My final advice would be to set realistic goals based on real situations. Try to learn in context. And most of all, keep it easy and fun.
Thank you so much. Good luck to everybody who's studying English by themselves or any other language. And see you in the next video.
Thanks very much. Bye.
動画をご覧いただきありがとうございました。ベルリッツのブログにも独学での英語学習に関する記事が載っていますので、より詳しく知りたい方はぜひ参考にしてみてください。これからも英語学習のアドバイス動画や楽しく英語を学べるショーツなどを投稿していきます。自信を持って英語を話せるようになりたい方はぜひチャンネル登録してくださいね。See you!